Guacamelee is like a really good spicy food dinner, but the cook is trying to kill you, and you're somehow still enjoying it. It's a platformer brawler game that is deceptively challenging. Maybe by intention, because one minute you're having a good old laugh, and the next minute, the game is now laughing at you. It reminded me about the time I beat Rayman Legends on a keyboard, which was absolutely painful, thanks for asking. Yet despite playing more difficult games, this still felt like an odyssey to beat, but let it be known I did. Twice on normal, and once on hard, and that, my friends, is a bunch of time I am just never getting back. Guacamelee follows the story of Juan, an average guy living as a simple agave farmer. Not a lot of people really care about poor Juan, but El Presidente's daughter does. Maybe too much, but she's too busy getting abducted by Mariachi Skeletor, who promptly obliterates Juan into the Shadow Realm, where upon meeting a ghost lady, he becomes a luchador, hopping between the worlds of the living and the dead in a quest to save both and rescue the princess of presidency. It turns out, the perks of being a newly minted luchador is that Juan has the resounding power of throwing people and must tackle challenges of the violent and navigational kind, sometimes both at once. Now, describing the gameplay is more of its own kind of challenge, because it's not hard to explain, it's just kinda intricate. It's just like the game. In the beginning, you got your dodge, 1-2-3 hit combo, and the ability to throw your opponent, which is really funny to do in this game. But then you start obtaining new moves, and although it's still easy, you need to become intuitive with the controls to keep a combo going, or to get from one platform to the next with the moves you have. It's so satisfying to get a stupidly high combo or just wreck shop with what amounts to a really simple and readable control scheme. Because while I've played a lot of fighting games and gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it,
But my fish, we flushed him down the toilet. He's in the ocean right now. He's alive.
No, he's dead.
Dr. Fishy! No!
some of those games have very complex combos or moves that you need to practically study like a college course. Or there are fighting games or otherwise that boil their combat down way too far into being numbing. Believe me when I say that Guacamelee finding this balance between straightforward controls and intuiting unique ways to continue juggling opponents is a godsend, because managing to make something difficult that you can overcome without pulling your hair out or just passing out from boredom is really hard, but it works consistently enough. It always keeps you on your toes, especially on hard. Because of this abbreviated control scheme, it also features a lot of collecting and secrets to find. This game doesn't shy away from its inspirations. In fact, it just references games every fucking second it gets. It calls itself a Metroidvania, and Wikipedia cites it as such, and it's so referential of Castlevania and Metroid especially, that it seems like an easy connection to make. But is it? I might not be the right guy to comment on it, because I've barely played enough Symphony of the Night, never touched a Metroid game in my life, and although I've played some Sundered, some random guy on YouTube said that it doesn't count as a Metroidvania, so I guess that disqualifies my gaming street cred. But with the few examples of the genre I've experienced, I don't know how accurate calling Guacamelee a Metroidvania is. It's less Metroid and more Mario. It's got its collectibles and nooks and crannies, along with some fun secrets, but it's more like mini challenges with those collectibles, and not a proper navigatable thing. Like, the game is pretty linear progression-wise, but then again, this tangent is just splitting hairs with the Metroid definition here, because it might not play like a Metroidvania, but it certainly feels like and looks like one. Which, speaking of, this game looks fucking gorgeous. It's a vector art style based around Mexican culture and mythology, a theme that runs throughout the entire game that's striking, colorful, and pretty eye-catching. When you begin to move between the worlds of the living and the dead, you can see the differences between the two. In the Mexican traditions, the Day of the Dead is a key inspiration to the Land of the Dead in-game. It's not depressing, though the game does juxtapose imagery like the thriving starting town and the living world being abandoned in the dead world, or the town devastated by a volcano in the living world being a thriving and cheerful community in the Land of the Dead. There are a lot of elements like this when the game decides to actually show it. But while the visuals are good, the music just fucking nails it. Like, it doesn't just complement the game's style, but it might even be downright competing with every other element in the game as being the most memorable thing about it. It's effective, and on top of the incredible instrumentation, it's just so palpable you can taste it. I just wish the characterization was as on point as, well, everything else, honestly. It's not bad, just underwhelming by comparison. Well, if you're comparing the baseline of what the game outright tells you. On the outset, characters serve to either further the plot or just expound jokes. But there is, maybe, keyword maybe, something a bit deeper and more complex, but that's diving into talking about the entire game's plot. But hey, honestly, we're already at this point. Spoilers ahead, in case you don't want to hear it. So you run around, beat up Skeletor's evil minions, punt some crabs, and finally make your way through the Hell Gauntlet of the Great Temple.
Tonight, I just had to kill a lot of people!
And then you finally face him, the big man himself, as he reveals his master plan to merge the world of the living and the dead into one and rule it all. And it's only after overcoming his transformation into whatever this is that you manage to defeat him. The world of the living and the dead is saved, and the girl who you've been trying to rescue the entire game dies. Credits roll to Juan living his life before finally reuniting with her in the land of the dead after passing on. The mask disappears. Congratulations, you beat the game. Kind of. Wait, what?
¿Por qué es imposible? Lo es. ¿Por qué no, estúpido bastardo?
Okay, so, this ending. I didn't get the first time I played it. I wound up being too much of a completionist and by happenstance stumbled into finding what I needed to get the happy ending. 'Cause I'm just that good, apparently. But upon beating the game regularly, you are given 2 big hints about what you need to do to get the happy ending. And from there, you need to overcome the gauntlet. To the tool tree to the depths of hell, you need to find all 6 pieces of the mask held by the Guacamelee idols, each with their own trials and tribulations that once you've overcome, only then can you get the final ending. And boy, it's painful. Not impossible, but just, man, it's almost like this was designed to hurt you playing it. It makes you second guess even doing it in the first place. It's almost intentional. Wait, is this intentional? But playing this without contextualizing the experience you're having kind of makes you slip by what the game is trying to communicate. Or I guess I should say what the game might be communicating. This is kind of speculative here. It is heavily implied that this isn't the first time a skeleton and a luchador fought one another, but whether or not it's a prophecy or some kind of cycle is about as relevant as who the original skeletal figure is. They're not. At least for what I'm willing to dive into. But while the skeletal figure in the temples probably isn't important, our main antagonist very much is. Carlos Colaca was a charro when he was a living man, basically a Spanish cowboy. He wanted to become a legend, but an injury to his arm ruined that dream for him. He went as far as to make a deal with the devil, but much like any Faustian pact, it was a cruel joke, made at his expense. But although he died and the world moved on, Carlos didn't. His hatred and anger fueled him to the point he overthrew the devil and clawed his way back to the land of the living. But by the time he returned, Carlos was long gone, replaced only by his lingering hatred and bitterness. Colaca is not Carlos. Instead, the revenant of the dream and legacy Carlos wanted to have. And on top of that, there's Shatabai. Shatabai is and was a witch, and also is and, well, was in a relationship with Colaca. She also wasn't just Colaca's lover, but also with Colaca when he used to be Carlos. She went through a lot to try and get Carlos back, freeing him from hell and overthrowing the devil by turning him into a chicken, only to find that the man she once loved was no longer there. And it's also that parallel that works with El Presidente's daughter, Lupita, because while she has, honestly, barely anything close to a level of characterization of Shatabai, with what little the game even presents of her, she does put a potentially bigger theme in place. Okay, so this is kind of me speculating here. But what if these 2 endings aren't the good ending and the bad ending, but ultimately represent Juan's choice between being a luchador and being himself? Okay, so how do I explain this? Juan is kind of a loser. It's expressed that Juan has always wanted to be a luchador even when he was a kid, but for whatever reason he never got to realize that dream. But now he's finally become one, with Colaca running around. But much like Colaca, Juan wants to become his ideal self, even if the one person in his life loves who he simply is. The regular ending does portray a feeling of sadness and loss, but it's not completely dour. The 2 do reunite in death, but the entire time Juan wears the mask. It's only when he reunites with Lupita in the land of the dead that it finally leaves him. The good ending, where Lupita lives, is one where the mask is destroyed. This just can't be a coincidental thing here. Maybe Juan is getting something from the Guacamelee idols, but if we interpret Guacamelee for how it's usually interpreted as a shrine of offerings, maybe he's not getting pieces of the mask, but offering them. You could interpret the challenges to get the mask pieces of Guacamelee as literal, but if it's metaphorical, it could be Juan struggling to let those pieces of himself go. to be willing to give back the very identity that was given to him. There's this quote from the son of El Santo, a big name in Lucha Libre, or at least from Wikipedia. The entire video where the quote came from is now long gone. So if this is wrong, apologies in advance, but it's still a really impactful quote I felt like sharing. El Hijo del Santo is also an environmental activist, which is pretty cool to be honest. And the movements that he's inspired and ultimately taken part in have his mask practically synonymous with that political activism. A luchador's mask is a symbol that can mean a lot of different things, which makes losing that mask scary. You're not just losing status or privacy, you're losing the very person you made from it. And without it, where does that leave you? It's only after Juan gives up those pieces of himself, after offering back the mask that brought him to that point, you can get the happy ending. Juan overcoming the struggles to put his ambitions into perspective, giving up what he could have had to live his life with someone who truly loves the man he actually is. If you think of it like that, it's oddly heartfelt. It makes it more interesting to put in perspective too, because again, the game doesn't deliberate the good ending and the bad ending. Just there's the end and the happy ending. But as much as I managed to inject metaphor and meaning into this little game, it's still me speculating. At the end of the day, you can just view it as a fun romp through a love letter to Spanish culture and customs, and honestly, that doesn't hurt to just enjoy it at its surface level like that. I don't want to hype it up as some kind of deeply thoughtful game here, because aside from interpretation, the game is probably not that deep. But still, it's an easy recommendation, honestly, and with a friend to play with, it probably opens up a whole new world of entertainment to experience together. As for me, I'm happy I got to play this game, and who knows, maybe I'll get to play the sequel. Maybe I'll make a video on it. But for now, why spoil a happy ending? I mean, there's probably a lot of really good stuff with that sequel, right? I mean, it's gotta be good. It's a sequel. It's like they've improved it, right? Like it's gonna be like 10 times is better, right? There's no way that it's an experience that's less than that. Really, can it? It can't. I mean, I don't know if I'll talk about the sequel, honestly.